So let's talk about determining the right business development strategy for your company. Doing this starts with defining the function of BD. And doing that starts with defining the levers and metrics you're looking for business development to grow. So what are some example potential BD growth levers? You could be looking to drive active users, advertisers, syndication partners, revenue, new vertical customers, publishers. The list goes on. And ultimately, it's dependent upon what your company goals are. But the first thing you need to do when you're looking to figure out what strategy works best and how you should focus your biz dev efforts is to define these levers. And not only define them, but prioritize them in terms of order of importance. So I personally think a great thing to do is just list these out. Number one, add grow user base, whatever it is. Number two, extract additional revenue from existing users. Literally order this out and use this as the framework for your decision making. Now, there's a lot of different things that business development relationships can improve early on in the stages of your company. But it's important as a young startup where time is your most valuable asset to focus on things that affect your bottom line. Optimizing things like user experience is just not as important as focusing on things like revenue, direct savings, growing your user base. These are the type of metrics that are really going to make your company allow you to do things like raise additional funding, maybe even get acquired. I've never heard somebody say that we acquired this company because they had such a good user experience. No, companies get acquired or raise money because they're able to show growth in their most valuable metrics, which is why you should really focus on prioritizing these quantitative metrics versus softer qualitative things like user experience. So after you've defined your levers and metrics, the next thing that I think you want to do is come up with just a few ideas on how the different types of BD relationships you mentioned earlier, which just to give you a refresher were product, brand, and distribution, might be able to grow these levers. And when you do this, be honest with yourself. Is business development a realistic channel to grow these things? And ultimately, at this point, you can only really make hypothesis. The experience that you'll have actually trying things, testing things in the market, talking to prospective partners, even looking at similar companies that have tried deals like this will determine whether BD is an effective channel for you. So let's talk about what type of biz dev growth strategy makes sense for you. Again, it comes back to understanding what BD levers you're trying to drive by creating mutually advantageous relationships. Once you have an understanding of these levers and the metrics you're trying to grow, you're just going to have a much better framework of how you might be able to drive them, whether that's product relationships, distribution partnerships, brand enhancement partnerships. But in order to understand which one might be best, you got to start with the foundation, which is determining which metrics you want to drive. After you've done this, it's time to really take a good look at your customer and user bases and try to really get in these people's heads and understand where do they hang out? And not only where do they hang out, but where do they hang out with intent? Because there are certain situations and instances where customers are primed to take the action that you want, whether that's signing up, purchasing, whatever your growth metric is. And there are certain situations where they're hanging out and they have no intent at all to sign up for your service. And your ability to understand their intent at these different potential partner locations, whether it's on site in their application, whatever it might be, is going to be very important for determining how effective these potential partnerships might be. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this and talk about understanding customer or user penetration. The reason that I want to talk about this is because I see a lot of business development relationships that are unsuccessful because people didn't get this part right. The bottom line is with a lot of services and a lot of different types of products, the customer base or audience that a particular startup is trying to grow isn't looking for their service. They're going about with their regular life, whether that's running their business, whether that's surfing online. They're not looking for the new thing that you're offering. Basically, your job as a business developer is to grow, is to get in front of these people through creating these relationships that grow whatever your growth metric is. Here's an example that hopefully shines a little bit more insight into what I'm talking about. So our company, Single Platform, the product that we built initially served restaurant owners. And I'm not sure how well you know owners of a restaurant, but these people are not on Google searching for marketing solutions day in and day out. They're making sure that the food's prepared for that evening, that the open sign is turned on the front door, and that people are showing up to work on time. And this is ultimately why we went direct sales. Now, in terms of business development, it wasn't in our best efforts to go out and try to get on all these digital marketing restaurant sites initially, because again, these people were growing their business. So because we chose direct sales, the best thing that we could do was use business development to empower our ability to sell these people directly. And that's why we went out and built a massive publisher network that not only made the product extremely powerful and much easier to sell, but also got in front of all of these restaurants by powering the menus on the sites that they knew that people were already finding their business on. If you go onto a restaurant today in any major city, you'll see a TripAdvisor sticker, a Yelp sticker, maybe even an Urban Spoon sticker. And that's why we decided to create relationships with these sites, because we knew that this was important to the restaurant, and that's where they were already hanging out with intent. So let's expand on this a little bit, because again, I see a lot of people make this mistake and ultimately spend a lot of time on biz dev deals that aren't successful by taking a look at what an audience without intent looks like. So Google Maps. When people go on Google Maps, what are they trying to do? They're trying to find places in the physical world, usually directions. Maybe they're walking around the streets. They want to figure out where this restaurant is or this gym, whatever it is, this place where they want to go. A lot of people might look at this and let's say they're doing a food ordering business like Seamless or something like that, and they would say, oh my gosh, this is great. People are searching for restaurants. It makes total sense to be able to allow them to order right there while they're searching. But when you think about it, does that audience really have intent? When somebody wants to order food on a Sunday, are they going to Google Maps to then maybe place an order? Or are they going to Google Maps because they're going to want to go walk there and go to the restaurant? And I happen to know that certain partnerships similar to this exact one that I described yielded little ROI for either company because there was no intent of the audience. Yes, viewing restaurants is an action that people frequently take on this app or website, but that doesn't mean that there's the intent there for there truly to be ROI in this relationship. Now let's talk about a biz dev deal where there was an audience with intent. Spotify, one of my favorite services to find new music. So what is the audience's intent when they go to Spotify? I'd argue that it's to listen to their favorite music and discover new music. Now, the deep integration with Facebook, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with Spotify, but essentially when I go on Facebook, I can see through a special integration all of the songs that my friends are listening to in real time. This was a BD deal. So displaying Facebook friends in-app behavior is highly relevant for finding new music, which is again part of the audience's intent. And this is why this is an example of an excellent BD deal that was highly successful, because there was synergy between what the two companies' objectives were and what the audience's intent was in both services. So after you understand your levers, where your customer and user base hang out and where they do it with intent, this is a great place to then ask yourself the critical question. What is the best way to reach these people? Is it product? Is it brand? Or is it a distribution-focused relationship with another company? And again, time is the best barometer of what will work best for you. Ultimately, experience will determine effectiveness. But these questions should serve as a framework to develop a good hypothesis to get started. Okay, once the function of business development and your strategy are defined, or at least the hypothesis is defined, the next step is defining your ideal partner. And the things that you want to specify are, our ideal partner serves this very specific customer or user. They have this many users or customers that we might be able to tap into with the relationship. They possess this type of company DNA. Maybe that's they're fast movers, or they care a ton about design, or they're really, really focused on providing a rich experience for their customers. And this is really important for determining how well you're going to work together, which is often a fundamental predictor of whether the relationship will be successful and fruitful for both sides. It's important to understand the benefit that they desire from the relationship. And the reason that this is A, not only so that you can pitch them effectively, but in this stage of the game, it's so that you can understand whether a relationship with them will be a priority. Again, the last thing that you want is to get sucked in to using a lot of your time and energy on a relationship that there's a priority mismatch, where they're not as focused as making a partnership successful as you are. Lastly, you want to ask yourself, will this partner ever build this themselves? Personally, I don't want to spend time on partners that plan on building things that I might propose to them. Now, you don't know this until you engage in the conversation, but it's just important to keep in the back of your mind that the ideal partner for you, let's say you're doing a product integration, never plans on building this feature themselves. And maybe that's even a question that you explicitly ask them in the beginning of your conversation. Let's talk about the partner market evaluation. And what this really means is getting an understanding of how rich the market is with ideal partners given your integration strategy. And this is one of the things that's going to determine which route is right for you, because ultimately, if there's not enough meaningful partners for a distribution type of relationship that you envisioned, or maybe a product integration one, then maybe it's time to start back at square one and rethink about what strategy you might want to use for your go-to-market biz dev growth strategy. Once you've determined how rich the market is, and this is literally just a research exercise, you want to ask yourself, are these relationships in this rich partner market repeatable across partners, or is there a conflict of interests? And what I mean by this is, if I do a relationship with one of these ideal partners, is that going to prevent me from doing the same exact relationship with other partners? Because ultimately, what your job is as a business developer is to create a meaningful win-win relationship that drives growth for your company, and then productize and repeat that for every single partner that it makes sense for. And that's scalable business development. Now, just to kind of give you an example of what a potential conflict of interest would be, again, single platform, our company on the publisher side, we were a data provider where we provided initially menus to other sites that did not have this information. Now you can imagine that getting the menus for every single restaurant out there is a huge task and something that honestly we couldn't do ourselves. And there was other companies out there that had menu data. So maybe that was Menu Pages or allmenus.com or whatever it is that were also collecting this data. One might have said, you know what, maybe we do a partnership with them and we use their menu data as well in addition to ours so that we have a more expansive data set that would allow us to get at other partners. The thing is though, is if we were to use another third-party sites that actually displayed the menus, this is an important distinction. We never had a destination site, like singleplatform.com was not a menu site. These other menu providers like Menu Pages and All Menus did. So if we started taking in their data and then went out to a site where a competitive site where a restaurant provider or people were searching for restaurants like TripAdvisor or Urban Spoon, All Menus or Menu Pages, they might not have been so cool with us giving their data to somewhere else. I mean, that was their secret sauce that drove people to their site. So we'd essentially be cannibalizing our ability to do additional partnerships that drove value to our customers if we were to pursue that type of biz dev relationship. So these are the important considerations that you want to ask yourself when you're trying to figure out, again, what strategy is right for you and whether this market is rich and conducive to creating repeatable, scalable biz dev relationships that you want. Let's talk about a few other considerations that you should take into account when you craft your BD growth strategy. Number one, what route can your company realistically handle at this point? Do you have enough engineers to do product relationships? Because honestly, things like a product relationship might not be right for you if you can't handle it. Maybe you should focus on things like email list partnerships, or a little bit easier, lower hanging fruit. Number two, where do you possess leverage in the market? Again, the more leverage you have, the more you're going to be able to accomplish effective partnerships, get them done quickly, and be able to test what channels are effective for you. And along those lines, you want to ask yourself, what can you test quickly? If a certain type of biz dev relationship that you think might be a good fit, but you're not sure, is going to take, months, years to determine the ROI, then maybe that's not the place that you start. Maybe you eventually get there and you focus on something a little bit easier to test to determine what channel might be best for you while you're getting started. Again, because as a startup, time is your most valuable asset. And when you're looking at your ideal partners, this is also another question you want to ask yourself. Is this person somebody that we'd be able to get a test out with quickly? Or are they somebody that has a history of being incredibly slow and really hard to work with? Understanding the best growth channel, whether it's product, brand, distribution, even the nuances within each one of those type of relationships, again, is an iterative process that you will begin to understand once you start to have conversations, test things, put things in the market, do pilots, all of which we'll talk about very shortly. So let's go ahead and give a concrete example here of single platform, my last company's business development strategy. Again, the product was a tool that allowed restaurants to enter in their most critical information and display it everywhere where consumers were making decisions. At least that's what it ended up being. And given our demographic of restaurants who are not looking for online marketing solutions, but instead are worrying about putting food on plates and making sure the wine glasses are clean, we had to sell them directly. And that literally looked like a bunch of people making cold calls, doing direct phone sales. So the best use of our time, because we knew that direct sales was the best way to reach our ideal customers, was spent empowering our sales team to sell more effectively by building out a publisher network that really made our product a no-brainer. Just to kind of paint a picture of exactly what the product did again. Customer would come into our platform, enter their menu or list of products and services, and information would get pushed out to all the sites that we partnered with. So some examples of the biz dev relationships that we had in terms of publisher network were Foursquare, New York Times, Yelp, TripAdvisor, Yellow Pages. If somebody made a change to the price of a steak on their menu from $9 to $7.25, that information would instantly be reflected through an API relationship that our biz dev team developed with all of these companies. Pretty powerful stuff, especially for businesses like restaurants that rely so heavily on having accurate information and using that to attract people that are looking for their business. So how did those biz dev relationships grow our bottom line? Number one, they vastly improved the product. Our ability to allow customers to publish their information everywhere consumers are making decisions online really armed our sales team to be successful and ultimately have an amazing product to sell that just converted at a much, much, much higher rate when they were calling these businesses. In addition, we were able to provide more value to the original customers that signed up. And for a subscription recurring revenue business like ours, lowering that churn rate is incredibly important to the health of the business. Another cool thing that these original biz dev relationships did was really get us some amazing exposure that resulted in a ton of warm leads for us to call. So across all of the sites where we were providing menu data, on the bottom of the menus, you would see an attribution image that said menu provided by singleplatform.com. Whether it was a consumer or a business that clicked on this image, they would be directed to a lead generation page. that people could submit their information and receive a call from our sales team. And these leads, after seeing for themselves that we were managing this data across the most important sites online, converted at an extremely high rate, which was just almost a marketing channel created through the biz dev relationships, which was great. Now, after this initial type of business development relationships that we did with restaurants and building a publisher network, we did focus on a few other things for biz dev. Number one, we wanted to grow beyond just restaurants because there's 600,000 restaurants in the US, but over 13 million different types of local businesses that people are searching for online. So what we needed to do was get relationships with non-restaurant specific publishers like Yelp, like YellowPages.com, Google Places, that allowed us to provide the same value to businesses outside of the restaurant vertical. In addition, we also needed to expand the data set that we were providing. So we started off with menus because we started off in restaurants, but after that, for us to provide that value, we needed to get our publishers to take more data from us. So name, address, phone number, photos, hours of operation, all of these data points were not only incredibly valuable for the existing customers that we had, which were restaurants, but also for all of those new customers that weren't necessarily as focused on the list of products or services or the menu, as we like to call it. This also really helped us sell enterprise clients who, in many instances, were just focused on getting their information listed and getting all of these different franchises and stores just out there, because that was a huge problem for them for a long time, because very few places did this effectively when we started the business. Lastly, we eventually moved into channel partnerships. And just a refresher on channel partnerships, it's when somebody else with a similar user base or customer base that has intent introduces your product or service to their audience. So we were basically doing reselling and remarketing partnerships. And another example of this, outside of the BlueMed example that I shared earlier, is MindBody. MindBody is the largest software provider for spas, salons, wellness centers, and what they do is they provide websites and mobile apps, and essentially we were their listing management partner. And in addition to all these amazing services that they already were providing their customers, we worked with them to fill in that white space of making sure they were listed across all the most important sites, and they had that rich data like their menu of services, their hours, their photos, that people really wanted to know beyond just the name, address, and phone number. And here's an example on the MindBody website where their existing customers can find a single platform and be directed to sign up.